Well, we were like a middle class family. My father was a traveling salesman. He sold coffee in all of Czechoslovakia and parts of Hungary. And my mother was a homemaker. So she didn't work anymore. Since she got married, she didn't work anymore. But
Hmm.
I don't know if they had any political views except being Jews. And
Would
I
you
don't think
describe them as observant?
no, they were not observant. They were not of my grandparents were observant, my parents were not. And they had no political affiliations that I know of. They had never told me.
Right. Okay. And do you know that if they experienced anti-Semitism as openly, Jewish in that time period?
I think they did because that's why they wanted to flee.
Okay.
And the only way out of Czechoslovakia was via Hamburg, and the
Mm.
St. Louis was the last ship that left.
Wow. Okay. So this is how you ended up on the ship. Your family went from Košice to Hamburg in 1939 or
In
before?
1939.
Okay. And Cuba was the destination.
Yes.
Do you know if your parents were they excited for Cuba? Were they planning to settle there permanently?
I think they planned to settle there permanently. They didn't know what was
Right.
going to happen. They were
As
just
you
to get out of
right.
Europe. And I remember my mother, she was studying Spanish on the ship. So, she had this book that was called 100 Words in Spanish, and she was studying the language. So she would have that when she got there.
Wow.
And they were looking forward to a new life. I don't know for how long, and I don't think that they wanted to go to the United States or anywhere after.
Right. And I mean, as you said, it was the last ship, right? That
Yeah,
was leaving, and they were just trying to get out and to get to a place where they could find safety for
yeah,
you and for themselves.
exactly. And we traveled with my father's older brother and his wife, the five
Okay.
of us.
The five of you on the ship together.
Yeah.
And we have some incredible photos of you on the ship, which I will share momentarily. But maybe while I do share them, what do you remember as a very, very young child of this ship's journey? Or, you may have also learned more about it afterwards and been told, but what do you know of your experience while you were on the ship?
Well, all I know is I was very happy. It was fun for me. I mean, a lot of people, the weather was nice. I went up and down the
Can you see this image here? Oh, Anna Maria is muted, unfortunately. Let's unmute her. Oh, there we go.
there we go. It's a fire alarm drill.
Oh, of course. And that's the joys of condo living, right? So
Well,
we'll bear with that. So this image is you and your parents. Is that correct?
yes, that's me, my parents and myself in Holland.
Excellent. And I'll just go ahead this is an image
This is also in Holland,
in Holland.
in the
Okay.
refugee camp, yes, in Westerbork.
And this is a picture of your mother on the ship.
Of the ship.
Wow. And we'll come back to those images, but I believe I have an image of you. This is an image of you,
Yeah, that's me.
age 4. Adorable. so you don't have a lot of direct memories of,
No,
as a 4-year-old, I would imagine it's more just an impression of being on the ship.
yeah.
But you were describing, so your mother was studying Spanish. How would you describe the mood of the passengers, the Jewish passengers, on that journey to Cuba? Were people hopeful? Were they relieved?
The truth is, I do not know. I do not know because I was just in my 4-year-old world.
Of course.
I know that there were a lot of people, and in the beginning, everybody was happy,
Yeah.
but later, I really don't know. I think there was a lot of commotion once we approached Havana.
Hmm. And
But why or
probably,
how, I do not know.
sure. Those are the kinds of details that a 4-year-old doesn't concern themselves with, right?
Absolutely not.
And that's one of the things that I find, I think that when we talk to a lot of child survivors of the Holocaust, in a way, being a child and that innocence of childhood, maybe in a way that helps preserve people and helps with that survival. At least maybe for some people that I've spoken with. I won't put words in your mouth. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my images again, and I'm going to just go on. So, of course, we know that ultimately the MS St. Louis was refused entry into Cuba, or the Jewish passengers were. And
Everybody,
so when the ship turned back towards Europe, do you know if there was any decision to be made in terms of where passengers got off? How did your family end up in Belgium
they,
initially?
they really didn't end up in Belgium. They just the ship docked in Antwerp, but we were sent to Holland.
Right, to Westerbork.
We never were in Belgium.
I see. Okay, so that makes sense. So it was sort of just a place to dock, and then people
Yes, that
were
was it.
okay. And so, life in Holland, maybe your memories become a little bit stronger in that period of the war? What do you
Sure.
remember of what life was like for your family in Holland?
Well, first of all, when we arrived, we were in quarantine
Mm,
because when you arrived from overseas, you had to be in quarantine to make sure that you were not sick. Then they then we went to a small town called High Platte, where the people took us into their homes, and until the refugee camp Westerbork was ready for us, and
mm.
that's where they took us next. And there, we had life was okay because the Dutch people were very good to us until the Germans came in, which was in May of 40.
Right.
So we had like half a year without Germans. And then when the Germans came in, it all changed. But we were permitted to go to live in Amsterdam
Right.
because we were so-called Hungarians, even if we were from Czechoslovakia, we were Hungarians, and the Germans were allies with the Hungarians. So in Amsterdam, I had to wear the yellow star,
Mm.
and my parents worked very hard to make ends meet. First, we lived with a Dutch couple in their apartment who let us live with them. And afterwards, we moved to my aunt and uncle, the ones that were on the ship with us. They were not in the camps because my aunt was not Jewish, so they let them out.
Ah,
So they
okay.
were living in Amsterdam, and we moved into their apartment. I went to school there, and not that I had much schooling because I had like first grade in the camp, and then part of second grade in Holland, in Amsterdam. And then then they took us to the camps to Germany.
Right. That must have been incredibly disruptive to your early education or,
Oh, absolutely.
formal education. Yeah. And very, and maybe we'll talk about the camps that you were sent to in a moment. Do you remember as a child, in Holland being Jewish and that being a source of, that you had to wear the star? Do you remember feeling afraid, or was there any bullying from other children or anything like that?
I really don't remember bullying in
Yeah.
school. I
Okay,
don't.
yeah. So
I
hopefully because it didn't happen, but I mean it's those are the kinds of things too that it's hard to say, right?
yeah,
Okay. And so 1944, that's the year that things changed significantly, correct? So it's when Germany invades Hungary. Now the fact that you have the status of being a Hungarian Jew no longer has the same meaning, right?
absolutely.
So what happened? So your father was deported to Buchenwald
Yes.
and
And and my mother and I to Ravensbrück, but we went through Westerbork. They took us first to Westerbork, which by then was a transit camp.
right,
And my father to Buchenwald and we to Ravensbrück were the last two, how do you say, the last
transport.
transports that did not go to Auschwitz or Theresienstadt, because the others went straight to Auschwitz and Theresienstadt to be annihilated.
Right.
So we were very lucky, if you can say that. Yeah.
By chance, right?
Yeah.
It's
Everything
very
is chance.
incredibly lucky. Well, thank goodness. And that's in Ravensbrück. Do you remember what life was like? Were you forced to work at all, or were you sort of it
That
was
was
towards the end of the war?
it was terrible. I was a little girl. I was
Yeah.
eight years old.
Wow.
My mother was working in at Siemens at the factory. They made electrical parts for the Germans.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That must have been very difficult
And
work.
yeah, it was awful. In that camp, there were only 6 children. We were
Wow.
only 6 little girls in that camp. All the others were adults, but not only Jews. There
Mm.
were a lot of people from other countries. We had, and every kind of prisoner had a different color triangle. The Jews had yellow, and the so-called criminals had red, and the saboteurs had green, and the gypsies had something else, and everybody had. There were a lot of people who were not Jewish.
That's so interesting. It's so interesting the
Yes.
way they organized people to even be easily identified by other prisoners, right?
Yeah,
That you could
yeah, yeah.
immediately see what someone's crime was. Wow. And so for being a child, I'm sure, being hungry and,
Oh
that
yes,
starvation.
hungry and dirty, and and
Wow.
yeah, yeah, and my mother, who was always very resourceful, she made friends with somebody in the kitchen, and they gave her an onion or they gave her some garlic, so I could have some vitamins. You know,
Mm, my
apart
goodness.
from the slop that they gave us. It just yeah,
Right.
it was very
I,
hard, very hard,
and
very
well,
very frightening, very frightening.
I'm sure. So when your mother was working, were you in the camp just sort of expected to keep yourself busy?
Sort of, and they made us do odd chores.
Hmm.
And we were very afraid because all the guards, those women guards with the big mm, dogs and all that, it was very frightening, very frightening. Everything was.
I can only begin to imagine. It must have been terrifying. And you said, what you were one of six little girls. Were
Yeah,
you able to interact with the other girls, or was it, you were
not much, not
no.
much. They were not from Holland.
Uh-huh.
I was the only one from Holland, or maybe two more. Some were from Turkey, and the rest I don't remember where they were from.
Okay. Okay. Very interesting. And so, Anna Maria, how many months were you in Ravensbrück?
Well, I think from October 44 till right before the war ended, till
Right.
end of March or something. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
No, 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 no. I'm lying. I was there for almost a whole year, from May of 44.
Wow. Okay.
From May of 44 until the war, a few weeks before the war ended. Yeah.
Incredible. It's incredible that you survived, especially being an 8-year-old girl. Now, maybe I can move on to ask you a little bit about liberation. Do you
Okay.
remember what that was like in
Yes,
Ravensbrück?
that I really remember.
Ah,
Remember that one day they came and said, all the Dutch women line up. And my mother said, she pushed me, let's get in line. We were not Dutch. She
mm,
didn't speak Dutch, maybe a little bit, but I spoke Dutch like a native because I went to school there. I was a kid, kids learn languages.
yep.
So she pushed me and said, you give the names because they wanted our names. So then they took us to the entrance, to the gates of the camp. And we're standing there. We didn't know what was going to happen to us, where we were going. If they were taking us somewhere, if they were taking us to the men's camp, which was next door and had a crematorium. We didn't know.
Mm,
We're standing there by the gates and seeing all those villas of the German high uppers. And we didn't know what was going on. And then the white trucks came from the Red Cross, and the Swedish Red Cross had some kind of an exchange with Germany that liberated different different nationalities. So they liberated the Dutch people from Ravensbrück, and we went with them. So they drove us through Germany. We were bombed twice on the way. We had to get out of the trucks, lie on the floor. A lot of people were killed. We were bombed by the Allies, of all things. Yeah. Anyway, so finally we got to Denmark, and there they received us with open arms. And from there they took us to Sweden.
mm,
And in Sweden we were in a camp that was, made for the refugees. And it was wonderful. It was great. We had lots of food, we had clothes, we had beautiful treatment. We were there for 3 months.
mm.
And then we learned that my dad had come back from Buchenwald and was in Holland. Because the Red Cross, every day they had a list of survivors and they posted it on the wall there. And we learned that he was alive, so we got reunited with them. And he was at my aunt and uncle's place in Amsterdam, and we went there.
Wow.
Yeah,
That must have been
it
a
was.
time of joy and,
Oh,
incredible happiness. And
yeah,
that is always something that I find fascinating, that just the reunification process and how, yeah, lists of people being posted and students often really struggle to understand, how could people find one another again without the internet or without,
yeah,
without a telephone to use. And it is really an amazing story that, the
pure
reunification.
luck, pure luck.
Yeah.
My father was liberated from Buchenwald by the Russians.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah,
That's fascinating as well, the different liberation experiences based on which country liberated which camp and
yeah.
So this is how you ended up in Sweden,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
imagine. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
because of the Swedish Red Cross.
And so you were in Sweden and you reunited with your father afterwards in Holland. And then how did you end up in Mexico City?
Well, my mother had a brother who, in Mexico City. He
Okay.
left Europe one ship before us, and he got
Wow.
to Panama, and from there he went to Mexico.
Wow.
So he sent us papers, and we went to Mexico City.
And what year was that? Was that
I was in 46,
in
in March
46?
of 46.
Wow. And so this is where you grew up, where you
Yeah,
spent a lot of your childhood in Mexico City.
that's where I grew up. That's where I went to school. I got married, had my children. Yeah.
Wow. And what was life like in Mexico City? I've always wanted to visit. I never have. I hear beautiful things about it.
Well, I was 11 years old. My parents both worked full time. My father peddled merchandise from one store to the other. My mother ran a kitchen of the Hungarian Jewish Club, and I was left to my own. I went to school, and I either went to meet my mother at the kitchen there, or I came home and was home alone.
Mm.
Yeah,
Was there a significant Jewish community in Mexico City?
there was, but I didn't know many people, you know. The
Mm.
only people that later I knew were the ones from the club.
Right.
But other than that, I went, you know, first year was very, very difficult because
Mm.
I was 11 years old.
Yeah.
I didn't speak Spanish. I didn't speak English, and they stuck me in a bilingual school.
Oh, yes.
So that was that was awful, you know.
That I can imagine. Yeah,
In
that would be
in
very.
fifth grade. So I was
Mm.
in fifth grade Spanish, in first grade special English for the ones that didn't know English. So by sixth grade, I was already okay. I spoke Spanish, I spoke English.
I'm sure you did very well, but it was a lot of upheaval to deal with
Oh
when
no,
you'd already.
it was very difficult in the beginning because I was different. First of all, I was afraid to say I was Jewish.
Mm.
I was afraid to say I was Jewish. They knew I was Jewish, but I was afraid to say I was Jewish, so I didn't. So other than that, I was left with a lot of traumas from the camps, you know. We
Yeah.
lived we lived in an apartment that looked on the third floor, and it looked out onto a refinery, and there were um, flames coming out of those chimneys, and I was very, very afraid of that.
Mm. Yeah.
And I was afraid of anybody in uniform, and of big dogs, of course, you know. And a lot of traumas, a lot of traumas.
Right. That's something that really you mentioned that in Ravensbrück that the dogs were a constant sort of
Yeah,
terror tactic, basically, right?
sure, you know those guards with with their guns and the dogs, and you know,
And that's
very
that's
frightening.
interesting how I think for a lot of survivors that trauma of those memories continues to pop up in life, and especially when you were just coming out of that experience and to be living in that environment.
I was
Yeah.
even afraid of people who wore boots,
Wow.
because the boots reminded me of those guards, you know.
No.
Yeah,
And
but
that's I'm sure for most young people and most survivors of the Holocaust, there was no therapy, there was no sort of support sort of for mental health in those days, or not a lot of it at
that
least.
didn't exist in those days for anybody, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
that's modern.
That's modern for sure, but that's something that I think, is
No, didn't
yeah.
exist.
A lot
Yes.
of people were just sort of forced to pick up the pieces and carry on with life without being able to voice what
Yeah.
really happened. So maybe, Anna Maria, now that we've talked a little bit about life in Mexico City, so you only came to Canada more recently, is that correct?
I came in 2009.
Okay. And maybe I can just, how do you like living here?
I love it.
You love it? Oh, good.
I'm very happy. I'm a
Glad
Canadian citizen, and you know,
it's a one. I'm glad to hear you feel that way, and I agree that it's a pretty wonderful country to live in.
yes.
Now, do you know if your parents or you yourself ever felt any bitterness towards Canada or the United States for not choosing to allow the passengers on the MS St. Louis to come in?
No, I never heard anything about it.
It wasn't,
My
no, it wasn't
parents never said anything about it. No,
it wasn't something they dwelled on with
no,
everything else
no,
that happened in the
no,
sure. Okay.
not at all.
No. So then this makes my next question. I'm curious. In 2018, the federal government of Canada offered a formal apology for the failure to aid Jewish refugees that were seeking asylum from Nazi Germany on the MS St. Louis. How did the statement make you feel? And do you think this was an important gesture from our government?
I think it was extremely important, just to acknowledge that something was done wrong, even if it was 70 years ago,
Yeah.
is a great thing.
And I
And
just wanted
then
to
to apologize for it is even more commendable. And the main
can
thing
we all
is,
see this picture here?
uh,
We can. Good. This is from when you were
in
able to
Ottawa,
attend the apology in person, correct?
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
good. That's a beautiful family you have there.
yes,
And okay, I'll stop sharing just so that I can continue on with our conversation. But I think I think it is very important, as you said, that even if it was something that happened many years ago, that it was a decision made by our government that, failed to protect Jewish lives and the lives of, innocent civilians. And it's important for countries to reflect on history so that we can make sure that we learn from the past and do better in
that
the future.
we don't repeat our mistakes.
Exactly. Agreed. Um, so maybe this is a nice question to follow that one up with. Um, why do you think it's important that we teach younger generations in Canada about the MS St. Louis and also just about the Holocaust in general?
Well, we should teach the generations, the younger generation, even the older ones,
Hmm.
because most people don't know about it. They don't know, and they think that everything has always been nice. And above all, so they learn to be compassionate and to help others and try not to make the same mistakes.
Amazing. Yeah, I think that's really, we need to learn compassion and empathy for those that might be different from ourselves. And
Exactly.
this is
Yeah.
this is an important lesson in this day and age, I think.
Yeah.
And is there any particular message that you want people in our audience today to take away from you speaking?
Well, only that they should not forget
Yeah,
what happened so that it's not repeated or similar things are not repeated.
right. There's that, I like the expression, certainly that if we don't learn the lessons from history, we're doomed to repeat them. And a similar expression that sometimes history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. So even if it may not always be the same exact thing, but there's a connection to the past.
Absolutely.
So Anna, we've got some wonderful questions coming into the chat here. So I'll just turn to our audience questions. And yes, please, if anyone has questions that you would like to share with Anna Maria, put them in the chat and we'll do our best to come to them. So one question here was, did your mom ever have to hide you or protect you in any way when you were in Ravensbrück?
Well, she couldn't hide me because there was nowhere to hide.
Right.
There was nowhere to hide.
Okay. And I think that's, yeah, especially
Yeah,
there
there
was a
was
lot of scrutiny. There wasn't a lot of children around. So,
no, but
no.
there were many, many people. We were in very close quarters.
Right.
Yeah.
Even just, you know, when towards the end of the war, when you mentioned that all of the Dutch prisoners were asked to step forward, and your mom said, we're stepping forward here.
Yeah.
That, you know, that's an act of protection in my mind.
Oh, it sure is.
That's a very savvy decision to make.
Yeah.
All right, I see another question here. And this is a question that you know, it's a great question. How has the current increase in anti-Semitism in Canada affected you, if it has?
It scares me.
Hmm,
Yes, I am very worried about it. Very worried about it.
I can understand. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I share some of those
And
concerns.
most of the people who are against us, they don't even know what they're talking about, you know, especially nowadays with all this television and all the media. It's, you know, most people are like, they just go like this because they don't know, and maybe they're not educated enough, maybe they don't know about it. So that's why I'm happy that you guys make these, you know, these chats.
Well, we're incredibly thankful that you and other speakers are willing to share your memories and your knowledge from, you know, living through some of the darkest consequences of anti-Semitism and you know what hate can look like. So you're a big part of the education that we're trying to do here. And so Rochelle says, thank you so much for sharing your story. So very important, especially now since the last year's events. Um, Another question, what was your family's name in Košice?
Name?
Yeah, like your family's surname.
Carmen.
Carmen, yes.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, you didn't know. Carmen, yeah. My grandfather's name on my father's side was Kohn, and he changed it to Carmen when most of the Hungarians changed their names to something that didn't sound so Jewish.
Ah, okay. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. Fantastic. And I just see for some reason, yeah. Oh, I'm just looking at the questions here. For some reason, Elise, I'm not able to see the ones that come before Ian's question, but I see that there's a few others here also. So yeah, thank you. That would be great if you can send. Um, what has helped you navigate your life? You know, you have incredible strength, if I may say so, but what has helped you to deal with, you know, you had a very difficult early childhood, and how do you think you've been able to navigate those memories?
Well, I think it's because of my parents. My
Mm,
parents never looked back. They always looked forward. It's not like they forgot, and they talked about what happened, but
mm.
they never dwelt on what they had or what they lost. They always looked forward, and that's what you have to do. Look
That's
ahead,
powerful.
look ahead.
You have to look ahead, but interesting as well. So that you say that they never shied away from speaking openly about the
No,
Holocaust.
no, because some survivors never wanted to talk to their children or their grandchildren or friends. No, no,
Right.
it's not like they flaunted it or they talked much about, but they never hid it.
Hmm. It
you
was
know,
the
but
reality.
always in the open. Yeah, always in the open.
Hmm. Okay. Fantastic. I think that's a powerful, yeah, way to model, to move on from that kind of trauma.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm just looking at more questions here. Lots of support, just people saying thank you. And a question from Simi, how did your parents adapt to the new life and all of the freedoms as well in Mexico?
How?
For your parents, I know we sort of spoke a little bit about the
Yeah,
impact on you, but
yeah.
your
Well,
parents.
I think they adapted slower than I because I was a kid, children are very adaptable. But they did adapt. They did adapt.
Was it harder for them to learn Spanish, for example?
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
hard. Not so much for my mother than for my dad. My mother had a good sense of languages, but
right.
it's they adapted. They
Hmm.
adapted and they tried to get ahead and they never looked back.
That's a good way, I think, to move forward. And from Saul, Saul Naaman, a question: did you know the family of Ernest Singer from Cosiche, uh, or the Kleinberg families, or Corona or Kleinberg families in Mexico?
No. What?
No? Okay. Well, and sometimes
Lamberg's in Mexico? No, I don't remember the name.
putting you on the spot, it might
No, no,
be,
no, that's okay.
but
Not
that's
a
always,
problem, not a problem, no.
you never know when there might be a personal connection. Um, okay, thank you, Elaine. Yes, another great question. So, why did you come to Canada? What brought you here?
Well, the truth is, my husband passed away,
Oh, I'm sorry.
and my mother, who was living with us in California and in Los Angeles, passed away too.
Hmm.
So my son said, "Come to Canada." And I was very happy to come and to be with my family. I had nobody there in Los Angeles, nobody left.
Hmm. That would be difficult, I'm sure. And that is very far away from Toronto, if that's where a lot of your family are today. So it's very good to have you here.
Yeah, I'm very happy to be here.
Good. All right. And next question here. Oh, that's a heavy one, but a good question. Do you think that there is any equivalent to the hate that we saw with fascism today? Do you think, is there anything in the world that is on that level of the fascism of the 1930s? That's a tough question.
Well, I think it's getting there. It's getting there if we let it. It's
Mm,
getting there in many places, many places. In many countries, the head of the country is a dictator,
it's alarming to see any
and
kind
they
of
have a lot of followers, and followers are usually blind.
right.
Uh, I think there is. I think there is. And it's frightening.
Yeah. No, we're definitely living in times of of alarming trends.
Yeah.
Um, and I'll just go next point here. So, a timely and important interview with a beautiful survivor. Did Ms. Gordon remember any prisoners wearing a badge with a purple or lilac colored triangle? Was there anyone in Ravensbrück with purple triangles?
I don't remember.
No.
I don't remember, but there could have been because people who were not, I don't know. I really don't know. I really don't know. Because the communists have and the criminals had and the homosexuals had and
Right.
uh, you know, I
I
don't
know
know.
I've
And
heard
people,
that, yeah.
people from other religions had to. But
Right.
I don't remember the color. No.
No, of course, fair enough. And I mean, I'm not sure about in Ravensbrück. I know that in some camps, Jehovah's Witnesses, I believe, wore a
Yeah.
purple or
Yeah. People who are of different religions that
right.
the
Yeah,
Germans.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, but great question. And another great question. And how are you still religiously observant today? Do you, practice your Jewish identity, or does your, is it a part of your family life?
Well, it's part of my family life. We have Shabbat dinner. I go to shul not very often. I go to the high holidays and when I have yahrzeit and
Mhm.
once in a while. But, it's not like I keep kosher.
Sure. But it's a part of your life.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Wonderful. Thank you. And all right, and I do see one more question. Do you think that today that there's a certain level of tolerance for anti-Semitism in Canada? And does that in a way change how you feel about the apology? When we talk about the apology with the MS St. Louis, does that feel sincere today in light of the rise of anti-Semitism in Canada?
I think the apology was sincere, and
Yeah,
I don't think it has anything to do with what's happening now.
understandable. Yeah,
I think what's
especially when,
happening now is something apart from that. Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, I understand that completely. And I think that oh, I see a few more great questions. Did you know the Hans family in Hameln and Košice? And I'm sorry, I'm probably not pronouncing.
It's okay. I didn't know anybody in Košice because I was a little kid.
Yes, I know. And I'm sure many people, as you were describing before our talk, that it was a large city that had
A quarter million inhabitants in those days.
um,
And when I went back there in the 80s, it was 500,000.
wow.
Yeah.
So it's grown a little bit. It's a big city, and it probably had a very vibrant Jewish community prior to the Holocaust.
Yeah.
Yeah. And okay, so I think if there's any other questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the chat. But I think that maybe I will just wrap up by asking Anna Maria, what is something that makes you hopeful for the future? I think that's a nice thought to end on. Um, the future is uncertain, of course, but is there anything that makes you hopeful for the future?
Well, I don't know. I just hope that people will realize that all this hatred is not conducive to anything good. I
Yeah.
really hope that the good people will be able to change the minds of the bad ones, but that is just be wishful thinking. But
Well,
let's just try. Let's just try to do the best we can.
I agree. I share your hope, and I think that no matter what, that we can never let that hope die. And there's a lot of uncertainty in the future, but when people work together and stand together, there's a lot that can be achieved as well, right?
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for speaking with me today and for sharing your memories and your wisdom with our entire audience. And again, thank you everyone on the call. If you have any follow-up questions or comments for Anna Maria, feel free to send them to Elise or myself, and we'll make sure that we get them to her directly. Okay?
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much for speaking with us today, and wishing you a wonderful holiday season ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. The same to you.
Thank you. Okay. Take care, everyone. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye bye.